Before we go on to loops, I want to cover some more conditionals. And you saw that we were using the if statement, so let me elaborate a bit on that as well as the Boolean data type. So I'm just going to remove what we have here from the previous video. Other expression, just like we have hungry here, we can say where hungry is equal to false, okay? Else if hungry is equal to false. So we're checking for a condition here. If that evaluates to true, execute this. And if that does not evaluate to true, then continue. And else if this evaluates to true, then do what's in here. And let me just put something in here for the sake of completeness. I'm going to say I'm already full, okay? If hungry is equal to false, then I'm full. And then you can have a final condition called else and say, for example, I'm sleeping. I don't care about hunger. All right, this is sort of a catch-all, and you'll see this condition, this sort of conditional construct throughout the course, and you're going to be using that quite a bit. You have the if check. If that is not equal to true, if this does not evaluate to true, it moves on to the next check. If this does not evaluate to true, and then you're going to basically whatever's in the else clause is going to get run. So when I hit the play button here, notice that it's printing out pig out. Okay. If I change this to false, okay, then of course I'm already full is going to get printed out. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that we're assigning a Boolean value to this variable because this variable is of type Boolean. But we can also assign an expression that evaluates to a Boolean value. For example, inside of parentheses, I can put this. 3 is less than 5. Okay? This expression evaluates to something, and that's going to be true. Let me show you an example. Let me actually comment out all of this temporarily. I'm going to select all of this and hit the command key along with the /, and that will basically comment out all of these lines. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to print out the value for the variable hungry. And when I do that, when I hit the play button, notice that it's printing true. Similarly, I can put an expression directly in here. For example, 4 is less than 2. All right. If I print this, of course, it's going to say false. All right. 4 is not less than 2. All right. So in the case of hungry, I'm assigning this particular expression 3 is less than 5, and of course it is. So this expression is going to evaluate to true, and we expect this first condition to pass. So let's hit the play button, and of course it's saying pig out. So inside of these if statements, we can have expressions. We can say 7 is greater than 4. All right. If 7 is greater than 4, and it is, then of course this part is going to run, and all of the rest, this is referred to as dead code, right? Because Eclipse, this IDE, understands that 7 is in fact greater than 4, and it considers everything else as dead code. That's why it's sort of highlighting this for you. If you hover your mouse over this exclamation point, it's saying dead code. This code will never run because this IDE understands that 7 is greater than 4. Let me define another variable here. It's going to be of type Boolean, and I'm going to say check, for example. That's going to be the variable name. And I'm saying 7 is less than 4, which of course it is not. 7 is not less than 4. So this check, the value that's going to be stored in this variable is going to be false. I can just put that directly in here. And of course we do not expect the first condition to pass this time. It's gonna probably go to the next one. So let's hit the play button and notice that, well, it dropped all the way down to I'm sleeping, I don't care about hunger. And the reason for that is because hungry, its value was true. 3 is less than 5, so this evaluates to true. So hungry, this particular check was saying is hungry equal to false, and it's not. Hungry is equal to true because this expression equals true. Same thing with check. Check is also false because 7 is not less than 4. So both of these conditions fail, all right? And we move to the final branch of this conditional statement, and of course this is going to get executed. Now I want to show you one more thing. Everything we coded in here was in the main method, and remember in Java the starting point of every program is the main method, and everything is executed line by line sequentially. So outside of this main method, I want to define another method that's actually going to return a Boolean value. So public static. Don't worry about what static is right now. We'll go over those things later on in the course. And since this method is going to return a Boolean, I'm going to put the data type Boolean after this. And the method name is going to be getValue, for example. I'm just giving it a random name here. And we're going to say return true. Okay, so this method is going to return the value true. And what we can do here is we can invoke this method inside of a conditional like this. Okay, and when we run this, notice that pigout is going to get printed because this invokes the getValue method, which returns a true. So this basically gets evaluated to true. Right? We can also do this. If getValue is equal to true, right, which it is, we can hit run, and of course pigout is going to get printed out again. Now if I check that against false, notice that since hungry was also false, it's going to go all the way down to here. Okay. Another thing I want to show you is instead of returning a true or a false, we can actually return an expression. Okay, and you're going to be seeing this in the course. That's why I wanted to cover that here. Let's say I want to return 7 is less than 3. Okay, now this is an expression. It evaluates to false. 7 is not less than 3. When I run this, what do you think is going to happen? We have getValue. If it's equal to false, run this. So let's hit play, and of course pigout is being printed because 7 is not less than 3, so this is going to return a false, and we're checking whether getValue is equal to false, and if it is, then print out this. So of course it was equal to false, and this print line statement was executed. Now another thing I want to talk about is combining expressions. And the way we can do that is there are two kinds of ways you can combine them. You can either combine expressions using OR clause or the AND. And the way you do that in Java is you use these two pipes. And we can say 7 is less than 3, or 5, for example, is greater than 3. All right. So in this case, this together makes an expression. And this it's going to return the result of computing this entire expression. And 7 is less than 3 or 5 is greater than 3 is actually going to return a true. Okay, and the reason is in the OR clause, only one of these expressions need to be true for this return statement to return a true. Okay, so when I run this, of course, it's going to say I'm sleeping. And the reason for that is this, we're checking for whether this is equal to false, all right? And of course, it's not equal to false because we're returning a true, and it's not going to run this, it's going to jump all the way down here. Okay, so keep in mind that you can combine expressions like this using the or clause, or you can also do ampersands, like that, and that's an and. For this to be true, both of these expressions must be true. So this now is actually going to return a false. 5 is greater than 3, that's right, but we also need this expression to be true, and of course that's nonsensical. 7 is not less than 3. So when we run this, take a guess as to what's going to happen. Of course, pig out is going to be printed because this returns a false. Okay, and we're checking for whether get value is equal to false. Now these expressions can get pretty complicated. Let me show you some more examples. Let me get rid of this up here. Let's change this back to so that it only checks for whether get value returns true, and only then it'll execute that. Every time you're surrounding inside of these parentheses, you want to think of that as an expression. And you can have expressions within expressions. So for example, let me change this to be another or clause, and I can say where 7 is less than 1, which obviously it's not, and I can surround this entire thing in parentheses like that. Okay, so 5 is in fact greater than 3. This piece right here is going to evaluate to true, and this piece right here is actually going to evaluate to false. But since we have an or clause, this entire piece right here is going to evaluate to true. And since this piece is also true, get value is going to return true, and of course pig out is going to get printed. So let me run that, and of course this part was printed. Now if I was to change, for example, this 1 is less than, let's say 1 is greater than 3. Now this of course evaluates to false, and this entire thing evaluates to true. So, and since we have an ampersand here, both of these expressions, this one on the left and this entire thing on the right, both must equal true for this for this part to evaluate to true, and for this pig out to run. And of course that's not going to be, it's actually going to jump all the way down here. So let's hit run, and of course it didn't cause this first part to execute. It went all the way down to here. Alright, so we've covered a lot of ground here, and I want you to get some practice applying this Boolean logic and dealing with these and or expressions. So I have an assignment for you, and that is to create this method called dog trouble. And this method is going to accept two parameters. One is barking, it's going to be of type Boolean, and the other argument is going to be hour, which is going to be of type int. And the problem statement is that we have a loud barking dog, and the hour parameter is the current hour time in the range between 0 to 23. And we're in trouble if the dog is barking and the hour is before 7. So 7 a.m. in the morning, if it's barking before that, we're in trouble. And if it's barking after 20, we're also in trouble. So we want to return true if we are in trouble, otherwise return false. So let me get rid of this stuff here, and let me define the method right here called dog trouble. And the parameters that it accepts is Boolean, barking is the first parameter, and hour is the second parameter, and that's of type int. And your job is to complete this method based on the requirement. And for testing purposes, I have these sample executions, right? So in this case, if the dog is barking and the hour is 6, we're in trouble, it's before 7. If the dog is barking and the hour is 7, we're not in trouble, so it returns a false. And if the dog is not barking and it's 6 a.m., then we're totally fine, we're still not in trouble, false. So complete this method. As a matter of fact, let me just surround these statements with print lines so you can see the result of your execution. So pause the video now and try this assignment out, and when you're done, you can unpause it and watch my solution. Again, the only way this is going to work is if you work on this on your own. Don't just jump directly to the solution. Okay? Good luck. Okay, welcome back. I hope you had the chance to work on this on your own. There are many ways of solving a particular problem, and here I'll show you two different ways, two ways of thinking about this. So let's first start with the case where the dog is barking. So if the dog is barking, then there's a possibility that we're in trouble, okay? If it's within the time frame of, between before 7 and after 20. Else, doesn't matter what hour it is, if the dog is not barking, we're not in trouble. So in this case, we'll just return false, all right? Not in trouble. We've taken care of the case where the dog is not barking. But if the dog is barking, right, then we want to check for the hours. So in this case, we can say if hour is less than 7 or hour is greater than 20, then we need to return true. We're in deep trouble, okay, according to the problem. Else, all right, so remember this else is within inside of this if, okay? We have an outer if, which is up to here. Inside of this if, we have another if-else statement, okay? So else, we are not in trouble. Return false, not in trouble. Okay, so anytime we return true, we're obviously in trouble. And you can tell by the example, if the dog is barking and it's 6 a.m., then we're in trouble. If the dog barks at 7 and past 7, we're fine up until the hour of 20. Okay, so this solution should suffice. And when you run this, we get the expected output. For the first case, right, we get a true as expected. For the second case, we get a false, and third is also false. If the dog is not barking, it doesn't matter what time it is, it's still false. We're not in trouble. All right. So that was one way of solving this particular problem. Another way is a bit more clever and more concise, and that's sort of the difference between someone that is starting off in programming and someone that has been in the profession for some time. And you will slowly develop this taste for making your code more succinct and clear. So believe it or not, we just need one line to solve this problem. And that will be the following. Return barking, and then inside I have another expression. Hour is less than 7 or hour is greater than 20. That's it. This will also solve our problem. So think about it. When barking is true and the hour is less than 7 and greater than 20 or greater than 20, either or, we're in trouble because the dog is barking. So this entire expression either evaluates to true or false. And when you look at this part, this evaluates to true if it's too early or too late in the day. And if the dog is not barking, for example, then it's false, because both of these expressions, this one as well as this one, must be true for this entire thing to be true. And if one of them is false, then this entire thing is false. And that's because of this ampersand. It's an and condition. It makes it compulsory for both sides of this expression to be true, for the entire expression to be true. Okay, so finally, it's time to move on to loops. I'll see you in the next lesson.